Today on the Bourbon Bytes podcast, I'm breaking down the legendary return of Wild Turkey's cheesy gold foil, two massive new drops from Heaven Hill, plus a bite-sized review of a very special independent bottling of Wild Turkey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bourbon Bytes podcast. This is the week of Thursday, May 21st, 2026. Hope you all are having a wonderful week so far. If you're tuning in live, I'm not going to be doing a live stream this week because I'll be traveling to Albuquerque to celebrate one of a good friend and listener of the channel's retirement from the Air Force. First of all, I want to dedicate this episode to Patrick Starkey, Bourbon Noob, as you may know him on the internet. We are celebrating the end of his military career this weekend. I'm so excited to be able to celebrate that with him, especially over Memorial Day weekend. You know, as we spend this time thinking about those who have lost their lives in the military, it's always great to honor our veterans and those who are currently in the military. So, looking forward to a fantastic weekend celebrating with him and several other fellow whiskey friends. If you're part of that, you probably aren't listening to this until much later because we are going to be having a fantastic weekend. But I want to get this out before then. Of course, I'm recording a couple days before this goes live. But we do have some breaking news to talk about here today. And one of these news stories is very relevant because this is the Evan Williams America 250 edition bottles. They're doing a special single barrel release bottled at 117.76 proof to honor, of course, 1776, the 250th anniversary of the United States. This is going to be a very limited selection of 250 barrels, all bottled at this special proof. But in addition to that, they're also going to be releasing a special edition label of the 1783 small batch and Evan Williams black label. Everything else is the traditional Evan Williams, same mash bill, same batches. So if you see them, they are cool to collect, but the one that really keep an eye out for is that single barrel 117.76 proof bottle. That one's going to be about a $40 bottle, but having the chance to try that and having a commemorative bottle is really cool. So haven't had a chance to try it, but I've heard it's a really good single barrel. So if you guys have tried it, let me know how it is. Now, in addition to the fancy labels, they're actually also announcing a partnership with the nonprofit Folds of Honor. And they're going to donate $75,000 to provide educational scholarships to the families of fallen or disabled U.S. service members and first responders. So I always love when it's more than just a fancy label, but a good cause. If you pick up those bottles, just know you're supporting something really incredible. Now, that's not all from Heaven Hill. They've also just launched their 2026 Grain to Glass collection. And this year they're calling it the Year of Wheat Bourbon. And it's going to be a trio release, spread out throughout the year. So the first of which is going to be a third edition Kentucky Straight Wheated Bourbon, a French oak matured specialty release, and a one-time extra-aged 9-year-old bottling, which makes me extremely excited for this year because they've been really hitting the nail on the head with these wheated releases. I mean, the Bernheim 20th anniversary that just came out that I reviewed a couple weeks ago on the podcast has been one of my favorite whiskeys of the year so far. So getting more wheated bourbon from Heaven Hill is always a plus in my book. Now, I haven't had a chance to try any of these grain to glass releases, but I love the story. I love that they are donating some of their funds to Heaven Hill's Family Farms First initiative with Farm Rescue. They're committed up to $300,000 through 2028 and up to $100,000 annually from a portion of sales of these bottles. So again, bottles with a good cause always means a lot to me, and I'm going to continue to seek them out. And as soon as I can get one to review, I will do it for you guys here on the podcast or the YouTube channel. Well, that may be all in the world of Heaven Hill news, but there is one final big bourbon news story that just broke this week. It is the return of one of Wild Turkey's most mythical bottles ever. This is the new gold foil edition Wild Turkey. They're calling this Austin Nichols Reserve. It's a 16-year-old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey hitting the market this year. So this is a reference of cheesy gold foil. So if you're not a longtime obsessor of Wild Turkey, this was a 1980s-ish release of Wild Turkey that had this really cheesy gold foil label on the front of it. And it was discontinued back in 1990. Now, this isn't the exact same whiskey as that. That came out in the 80s. It was a 12-year-old release, but secondary market for it is insane. Bottles are going for over $1,500 of the original cheesy gold foil. Now, this one is going to be 4 years older. It's coming out at 16 years old. It's going to be pulled exclusively from Camp Nelson Warehouse D and bumped up to 120 proof. So that original 1985 one was only 101 proof. The retail price on it is going to be up there. It's going to be $400 MSRP. But when you consider the legendary status of this gold foil label, I can see a lot of people seeking this out to compare it. Now, what's also interesting that this is going to be Bruce Russell's first solo project with the brand. Of course, he is the son of Eddie Russell and the grandson of Jimmy Russell. And in an interview with Garden and Gun magazine, he says that he remembers seeing the cheesy gold foil bottles around when he was a kid, but never knew of the hype until much, much later. It's a really great interview. Definitely read it. They question him, does this have the funk of that original release? I think it's really cool to see someone that's part of the Jimmy Russell family revive this brand, this legendary bottle. I think it was more of a fan favorite than anything that Wild Turkey thought was going to be so huge. So I am very, very excited for this. $400 is up there, but when you look at some of the other Wild Turkey exclusive releases lately, it's not that far off, right? Russell's 13, Russell's 15 are already jumping up there in price. So a chance to get a very limited edition 16-year-old barrel proof Wild Turkey. I mean, I could see a lot of people buying it at $400. No idea what the secondary market for this one's going to be, but it's something for you to keep an eye out for because if you see it, you probably want to buy it. At least if history proves us right, this is going to have a good value after the fact, even if you don't drink it. But lucky for us, we have a very special wild turkey pour that I get to enjoy in this week's bite-sized review. All right, I buried the lead here a little bit, but this is a bottle I've been really excited about, and I've been enjoying since last year, but haven't had an opportunity to really review here on the podcast. This is a new label from K&L Wine and Spirits, which is my local liquor store here in Southern California. They just recently expanded all the way to New York City as well, but they have a new line called Every Drop, and this is their independent bottling of bourbon. Now, this one in particular is a 7-year-old release called Living Legend, batch number KY0325. Now, they contractually can't really tell you where this is from, but right here on the bottle it says it is distilled in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. And we know one big distillery in Kentucky is Wild Turkey. So while they can't officially say it, it's all but confirmed that this is a 7-year-old independent bottling of 107 proof Wild Turkey. And the best part is, it's only $50. I think that's what's crazy. This is something that I expected to sell out really, really quickly on their website. But I think maybe either people just don't know about it or it's just something that they just got a lot of. I even brought this to some friends in Kentucky and asked them to name the bottle. They were quick enough to guess that it was Wild Turkey, but they had no idea what release this was. So I'm very excited to give my first bite-sized review impression of Every Drop 7-year-old from K&L Wine and Spirits. Let's give it a nose. Ah, lovely nose. I mean, it's bright, it's sweet, it's fruity, really beautiful on the nose. There's a little bit of a floral aspect, but it's more of like a honeysuckle than like a floral that's gonna like kind of make you feel like your allergies are acting up. It's a sweeter, maybe like a white flower honeysuckle kind of note. It's really beautiful on the nose. Now, what's interesting is this is bottled at 107 proof, which is potentially, I mean, not confirmed, a nod to Wild Turkey's pre-2000s barrel entry proof of 107. So there's thought behind that specific proof with this release. Now, I mentioned that this was a blend, but it's actually a very small batch. There's only 10 barrels as part of this blend, which is why I'm surprised so much of this is still available. Maybe people are hesitant because they don't necessarily explicitly call it wild turkey. But if you read through their reviews on the page from their employees, they describe this as that old kickin' chicken in Tyrone. So again, make of that what you will, but I think that's pretty much all but confirmed to be wild turkey. And on the nose, yeah, it's got a little bit of that funk that you expect from that. Spicy, but not quite, cinnamon. It's a little more in the allspice territory. Not too much crazy on the nose. I mean, I think 107 proof is really approachable. I think we're going to go in for a taste of this to get a real first impression. Let's go for it. Cheers. Oh, wow. Man, is that easy to drink. It's such a sweet oakiness. It's not like a darker, rich oak that you get on some older bourbons. It's very sweet, but the oak is still very prominent there in flavor. Now, that being said, there's a lot of baking spices here. Again, it's almost reminding me of like a milk chocolate or like a milk chocolate pastry. It's got some like caramel fudginess going on as well, but there's a little bit of fruitiness. It's a little bit of like a darker red fruit, maybe a bit of I don't know if I wanna say raspberry or raisin, but there's something sweeter and, a little bit tart and tangy there on the palate as well. With all that being said, it is extremely well-rounded, extremely balanced, and there's a reason this is my second bottle of this that I'm almost finished with. Gonna pick up a third here soon because this is probably one of the best, most balanced bourbons with an age statement from Kentucky that I've had in a long time at that price point. I know that's a lot of caveats, but what I'm saying here is you have a very well-aged bourbon with a very delightful flavor profile. Not overly complex, but just complex enough to make you think about it and not, just gulp it down like you might would for some other $50 bottles. It's not the longest finish, but it's a solid medium finish for this release. At the very back end, you get those oak tannins that I was loving up front about it. So it comes across as just well-rounded. You start with the oak, you go sweet pastry, vanilla, caramel, fudge, and even fruity on the finish, back around to that toasty oakiness, and it's just a fantastic pour. I mean, I think this is hard not to give a great recommendation for. So on the podcast, we do a very simple rating system out of 10. I don't break it down by palate, proof, price, or anything like that. It's just more of like, what do I recommend this bourbon as? For this being what it is, a 7-year-old independent bottling small batch release of an iconic Kentucky distillery. This is hard not to give a score of 9 out of 10. And the only reason, people are gonna say like, why didn't you get a 10 out of 10? Why is it not a perfect score? Because I consider everything, including availability. With this just being exclusively for K&L, it is gonna be hard to find, right? This is something I can recommend now, but for those of you listening in Colorado or Indiana, you probably will never see this bottle. So that has a factor in it. Also, I will mention it is 107 proof. Would I have loved it to be at cask strength? Would that have made the finish probably a long finish and really rounded it out to that perfect score? Yes. So there are some faults here, but a 9 out of 10 for an independent bottling of one of my favorite Kentucky distilleries, I mean, is not bad at all. So I'm really curious to hear if any of you have tried this one or if you've had anything similar available at your local stores. It's the first I've heard of something like this and maybe the last for all I care. So I'm going to buy a couple bottles of this as a backup. This is going to be an everyday drinker for me at that price point. I mean, it's almost unbeatable and it tastes really good too. If you are in the Southern California or Northern California or New York City markets, head to your local K&L because this is one you don't want to miss out on. And if you are not local, check out their website because they do offer shipping. It's really an incredible pour and one of the best things I've tasted all year. So that being said, this is going to be now a contender for my top 10 whiskeys of the year, which I will announce towards the end of the year. So stay tuned. I usually announce that over on YouTube, youtube.com/Bourbon Bytes. You can also become a supporter of the channel for as little as $2 a month at bourbonbytes.com to be an active part of this community and help shape the future through bottles like this. So thank you all so much for listening. This has been a fun episode. Listen, I got to talk about Heaven Hill Wild Turkey and then drink some special wild turkey. I'm having a great night. So hopefully you are having one too, or morning, whenever you listen to this. By the way, thank you guys for saying that you enjoy this on your commute to work. I like being a little bit of a brevity and levity part of your day. So thank you for listening. Of course, feel free to leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast app of choice. It does help out. But until next time, this has been the Bourbon Bytes podcast. Cheers, and I'll talk to you guys next episode. Bye.